Today is section 5.3, and we're doing more with the acres problem in the mowing. So let's go ahead and get started on page 84. It says a composition of functions forms a new function by substituting the output of the inner function into the outer function. The function y equals f of g of x is a composite of f and g, where g is the inner function and f is the outer function. The table shows information about Jim's mowing service. Use the table to evaluate each expression. Tell what the expression represents. So there was a lot of words there, maybe a little confusing, but we will work through it. So let's go ahead and remind ourselves that this is the t of a function. I would write this in your book. And that was for a. So you can see if I have an a of 1, a of 4, 5, a of 2, a of 3, a of 4, etc. The time to mow function is over here. We called that c of t. That was 30 plus 20t. So again, you can pick any time. They have picked 4 different times. 4 hours, you plug in a 4 there, you'll get 100, and so on. So I know we can do these first two pretty easily. T of 4. So find the t function, which is this first one. We're going to input 4. What happens when I input 4? I get 16. How about c of 4? So that means go to the cost function and plug in 4. Here's the cost function itself. These are when the values are plugged in. So I plug in 4, I get 110. Now to the harder ones. C of t of 1. So let's go slowly here. First of all, just do this part. What is t of 1? So go to your t function, input a 1, you get 4. So this part right here is 4. Now I'm not done. Now I have to take that and do c of 4. So go to your c function, plug in 4, you get 110. Okay, so you do the inner part first, and then the outer part. Let's look at the next one, c of t of 4. So again, let's do this inner part first. What's t of 4? So go to your t function, plug in a 4, you get 16. That's the inner part. Now it says do c of 16. So go to your cost function, plug in 16, your output is 350. Okay, now we didn't tell what these represent, so go ahead and pause the video and write down what this whole thing represents for each one, A through D. Your answers are, for part A, it takes 16 hours to mow 4 acres. Part B, it costs $110 for 4 hours of mowing. Part C, it costs $110 to mow 1 acre. And D, it costs $350 to mow 4 acres. Let's do some more practice. So we have the f of x function here and the g of x function on this side. So again, the first two should be easy. F of 3. So you're going to the f function, that's this table. Plug in 3. I plug in 3, I get 1. Next, g of 3. So go to your g of x function, input a 3, your output is 2. Okay, now we have a composite function. Remember, do the inside first. So do this part first. What is f of 3? Here's the f function. Here's an input of 3. I would get a 1. So now I have simplified this inside. That's 1. So now I do g of 1. G function, plug in a 1, and I get 4. Okay, maybe pause the video and try the last one without help. Okay, let's go over the answer. g of 3, the inside first. So my g function, input is 3, I get a 2. And now I have to do f of 2. So my f function, plug in a 2, I get 2. That would be my answer. Okay, let's skip to number, we're not going to do number 3, but I want to show you something in number 3. Basically this part up here. You will see something either written like this or like this. This looks like fog. You may hear math teachers at some point saying, oh, have you guys done fog and goth yet? This is what we're talking about. This looks like fog. It looks like it says FOG, and this is goth. That's kind of just what it looks like, just some way to describe it. But what that means is this. So if you ever see f of g of x, that means the same thing as f of g of x, which we have been doing. We just did some examples on the previous page. Okay, this is not times, it is not multiplication, it's just how we write a composition. So the g is the inner function, f is the outer function. If you see it in this order, g of f of x, that is the same as writing it as g of f of x. So f of x is your inner function, you would do that first, and then you would put that into the other function. Let's go ahead and practice some on, let's look at number 4, I guess. What does the notation g of h of t represent? What is another way you can write it? So remember, just like I showed you in example 3, another way you could write that is g of h of t. So this is the inner function. That's why I wrote h of t. It goes on the inside. It represents doing h of t as the inner function. You're going to plug it into the outer function, g. Number 5, explain why f of g of x is different than f times g of x. Well, this means I'm multiplying, and this means I'm plugging one into the other. That is very different. Very different. And then number 6 is a tricky one because we haven't done too much practice, but let's go over it. Given p of t and q of t, write the equation for p of q of t. Let's write it p of q of t. Let's write it that way first. Now let's look at the inner function. The inner function is q of t. That is getting plugged into p. So let me go off to the side for a second. If I said find p of 5, what would we do? We would plug 5 in to the p function. If I said p of 22, you would plug 22 in here. If I say p of q of t, what are we plugging in? This function in. Just like we plugged in a number, we're plugging in a function. So we're going to plug something in, square it, and add 4. We're not plugging in 5 or 22, we're plugging in a function, t plus 3. Okay, that's the gist of it. Then you would want to simplify. So sometimes people mess up when they simplify this. They put t squared plus 3 squared, which is not exactly accurate. Probably best to write it times itself because that's what squared means. Distribute. And simplify. Notice I didn't get a specific numerical answer, I got an expression. Okay, let's do more practice of that in number 8. Or maybe 7, let's see. Yeah, let's start with 7. So we have 3 functions. We're going to keep using f of x, g of x, and h of x. Number 7, evaluate each expression. So look at the inner part. f of 2. What's f of 2? Well, here's the f function. What do you get when you plug in 2? You get 4. We've just done the inner function. We got 4. Now we do g of 4. So take the g function and plug in 4. So that's 8 minus 1, 7. Notice we're not multiplying. We're not taking the g function times 4. This is function composition. We're putting it inside the other one. Okay, let's try the next one. The inside function is g of 2. So I take the g function and I plug in 2. So that is 3. Now I do f of 3. So my f function, plug in a 3, I get 9. Okay, there's a little difference here between question 7 and question 8. Question 7, it's f of g of 2, f of g of f of 2, f of g of 2. There's a number we're plugging in. Here we're not plugging in a number, we're plugging in the function without a number. So let's show you how that's different. And number 8 is going to be a little bit like number 6. So here we go. We are writing f of x in for g. So let's go ahead and write the g function. The g function is 2x minus 1. So I'm going to write 2 something minus 1. If it said g of 20, we would plug in a 20 right there. If it said g of 50, we'd plug in a 50 right there. But it says g of f of x. So we are plugging in the whole function, not a number. So we are plugging in the f function into the g of x function. So our f function is x squared. To simplify that, you're just going to get 2x squared minus 1. And we can label it g of f of x. Okay, so you're not plugging a number, you're plugging in an expression and simplifying it. Let's try another one. It says f of g of x. So g of x is the inner function. That's going to go into the f function. I always like to write the outer function and leave a space. So the outer function is x squared. What am I plugging in for x? I'm plugging in this whole function, g of x. That's what's getting plugged in. And now I simplify. Again, it might help to write it multiplied by itself, because that's what squared is. Go ahead and simplify that out. You should get 4x squared minus 4x plus 1. All right, and then we're going to go to number 10. It might be helpful to recopy, like I have over here, these 3 from the previous page. So if you want to pause the video and recopy these on page 86, so you can view them as you're working. Let's start with the first one. H of g of 3. So we have a number here to plug in. So let's find g of 3. Which is 5. And now I have to plug 5 into the h function. So I get 17. Okay, part B, write the composition h of g of x in terms of x. You can leave it like this, or if you prefer to rewrite it. Sometimes this is a little easier so you can see the inner function a little better. Notice in part A we had a number to plug in. Here we don't have a number, we have an entire function to plug in. So this g of x is going into the h function. So let me go ahead and write the h function with a space. And like I've said many times, we are plugging in this, which is not a number. It is an expression, so I need to plug g of x in where the variable is. And from there, you just simplify. All right, let's go ahead and try 11. Number 11, g of 2. Now, you might be thinking, I don't know how to do that. Yeah, you do. It's just like all the other ones before, only we're using the g function twice. So let's start with the inner part, g of 2. So take the g of x function, plug in a 2. You get 3. Now what am I going to do with that? Now I'm going to find g of 3. Take the same g function, plug in a 3. My answer is 5. It's really no different than number 10. We're just using the g function twice. Let's look at B. Write the composition g of x, which also may be written like this. Remember, this does not mean multiply. Multiply would be a tiny dot. We're not multiplying. We're not taking 2x minus 1 times 2x minus 1. That's not what we're doing. We are taking g of x and plugging it into g of x. So let's begin by writing g of x with a blank for x so we can plug something in. And what we're going to plug into this function is the g of x function. So this function is going in here. Lastly, simplify. Okay, so this is again composition of functions, taking one number, plugging it into another, or maybe taking a whole function and plugging it in. If you need more practice, I'm sure there's probably other videos online that you could do, other worksheets online that you could do for practice. If you feel comfortable, you can go ahead and start working on your homework.